Welcome to Monk's Temple. As you settle in, let the world outside soften. Let the weight of your body be fully supported by the chair, the floor, the earth beneath you. Notice your breath, not to change it, but to become aware of its gentle, autonomous rhythm. In and out. A constant, quiet wave upon the shore of your awareness. Tonight, we begin not with an instruction, but with an invitation. An invitation to explore the most intimate landscape you will ever know. The vast and often silent terrain of your own mind. Our journey draws from the deep well of Buddhist wisdom, not as a distant philosophy, but as a practical map for navigating the human heart. It is a map that points relentlessly inward, to the source of true peace. Let me begin with a story, one from my own early days of seeking. I was in a bustling city, feeling utterly adrift amidst the noise. I believed my peace was somewhere out there. In the perfect job, the right relationship, the approving glance of a mentor. I was a cup, cracked and empty, held under every passing waterfall, hoping one would finally fill me. One afternoon, overwhelmed, I found myself in a small, dusty botanical garden hidden between tall buildings. In the center was an ancient, neglected fountain. Its basin was dry, littered with dead leaves. A water pipe fed into it, but the tap was rusted shut. People would walk by, glance at the dry fountain, and move on. It was a symbol of lack. I sat there, feeling a strange kinship with this broken stone structure. An old gardener was tending to some rose bushes nearby. He saw me sitting there, day after day. Finally, he ambled over, carrying a worn toolbox. Without a word, he began to work on the rusted tap. It took him the better part of an hour, with patient scraping and the gentle application of oil. With a final, soft groan of metal, the tap turned. Clear water bubbled up, then flowed, filling the dry basin. The dead leaves swirled and were carried over the edge. The sound was immediately calming, a gentle splashing that seemed to quiet the city's roar. He looked at me and said, "The water was always in the pipe. The city's main line runs right under here. The fountain was never broken. It was just closed off." He then pointed to a spigot on the wall behind me. "That one works, too. You could have had a drink anytime. You were just looking at the fountain." In that moment, something shifted. I had been that dry fountain, waiting for some external agent, a person, a success, a circumstance, to come and turn my tap. I had ignored the functional spigot, the accessible source, because I was fixated on the grand, broken centerpiece of my life. Buddhism, in its essence, is that old gardener's patient work. It does not bring you new water. It points to the rust on your own internal tap. It offers the tools of awareness and practice to gently loosen the constrictions, so the peace that is already flowing beneath the surface of your being can rise up and fill you. The source is not out there. The source is the underground aquifer of your own clear awareness, and it is eternally connected to the main line. If this idea of turning your own inner tap resonates with you, I invite you to subscribe to Monk's Temple. Here, we gather as fellow gardeners, sharing tools and reminders for this very inner work. This leads us to the first, and perhaps most liberating, of the Buddha's profound insights, the nature of suffering and its root. We often believe our pain is manufactured by the world. By what people do or do not do. By events that befall us. We point to the empty fountain and blame the city for cutting the water. But the teaching is more precise, more inward. The Buddha taught that suffering arises from tanha, often translated as craving or thirst. It is the desperate, clinging reach for something outside ourselves to make the inside feel okay. It is the rust on the tap. It is our conviction that the fountain's beauty depends entirely on an external water supply we cannot control. I remember a woman who lived in a house with a beautiful, large window that looked out onto her neighbor's magnificent, sprawling wisteria vine. It was her daily joy. In spring, its purple blooms were a cascade of perfume and color. She would arrange her chair to sit and look at it for hours. Her mood was synced to its cycles. When it bloomed, she was happy. When it shed its leaves, a melancholy would settle over her. One year, the neighbors decided to move. The new owners, practical people, saw the wisteria as a messy, invasive plant. They cut it down. They tore out the roots. When the woman looked out her window, she saw a raw, empty trellis and a pile of dirt. She was devastated. It felt like a personal loss, a theft of beauty. She fell into a deep sadness, mourning not just the plant, but the loss of her anchor, her source of joy. For weeks, the empty trellis was a wound in her view. Then, one morning, a small vine of morning glory, seeded from who knows where, had begun to climb the bare lattice. Its leaves were heart-shaped, tender. A few days later, delicate blue flowers opened, trumpets to the morning sun. They were not the grand, perfumed spectacle of the wisteria. They were modest, ephemeral, closing by afternoon. But there was a different kind of beauty in them, a quiet, resilient persistence. She had been so attached to the form of her happiness, the specific, grand, permanent-looking wisteria, that she had become blind to the possibility of other beauty, to the inherent impermanence of all things. Her suffering was not in the loss of the vine. It was in her demand that the vine, and the joy it gave her, be permanent. She had built her inner peace on the stability of something that was, by nature, always changing. This is the core of the teaching. We build our homes on sand and are surprised when the tide comes in. We tie our sense of worth to jobs that can end, to relationships that evolve, to praise that is fickle, to health that is a temporary gift. We say, "I will be happy when." And we hand the key to our inner state to a circumstance that is, by definition, unreliable. The Buddha's radical offer is this: you can build your home on the bedrock of your own understanding. You can find a happiness that is not contingent. It doesn't mean you won't enjoy the wisteria when it blooms. It means your fundamental okayness does not leave when the wisteria does. You can appreciate the morning glory for what it is, without comparing it to what is gone. Let's explore this feeling of handing over our key. Think of a time you felt anxious waiting for a text message back. In that moment, where did your mind reside? It likely resided in the other person's phone, in their schedule, in their intentions. Your peace was held hostage by something utterly outside your control. Your inner weather was stormy or overcast, waiting for the sun of their reply to break through. Now, imagine that same situation, but from a place of inner grounding. The longing for connection might still be there, that is human. But the anxiety, the storm, is optional. From a grounded place, you can think, "I have expressed myself." The ball is in their court. Their response time is about their life, not my worth. My peace is right here, in my breath, in this moment, regardless of what their phone does. This is not indifference. It is sovereignty. It is taking back the key to your own inner climate. The practice begins here, in these tiny moments. It begins when you notice the handoff, "There I go, giving my calm away to that traffic jam, to that critical comment, to that silent phone. The practice is the gentle noticing, and the even gentler retrieval. Oh, I can take that back. My peace is mine to steward. This is the beginning of digging your well, of scraping the rust from your own tap. It is the most important work you will ever do, for it determines the quality of every experience that will ever follow. Let us continue. Settle back into your awareness of breath, that gentle anchor in the river of now. We've touched on the idea of our inner source, and the rust that blocks it. Now, let's look at one of the most powerful solvents for that rust, the clear seeing of impermanence. In Buddhism, this is called anicca. It is not a pessimistic observation, but a simple, profound truth about the fabric of existence. Everything that arises, passes away. Every sensation, every thought, every feeling, every season, every relationship, every life. To resist this truth is to swim against the current of reality itself. To align with it is to find a profound, unshakable freedom. I want to share a story about learning this not from a grand loss, but from a library. In my youth, I was a passionate collector of books. I loved their weight, their smell, the promise held in their pages. I built shelves and carefully organized them. This collection felt like an extension of my mind, a permanent testament to my journey. Then, a great flood came through the basement of my building. Water seeped in silently in the night. By morning, the lower shelves were ruined. Books were swollen, pages fused together, ink blurred into abstract Rorschach tests of loss. I stood in the murky water, heartbroken. I was not just mourning books, I was mourning a version of myself, the careful curator, the owner of this tangible wisdom. In the following days, as I hauled out soggy cardboard boxes, something unexpected happened. A neighbor, an elderly woman who had lived through war and displacement, saw me struggling. She brought me a cup of tea and said, "I lost my first library, too. All the books from my childhood home. For years, I carried the ghosts of those specific pages." She gestured to the ruined pile. "But you know, the story isn't in the paper and ink. The story is here." She tapped her temple. "And here." She placed a hand over her heart. "The book is a vessel. It holds the water, but it is not the well." She helped me salvage a few volumes that were only damp at the edges. The rest, we let go. That act of letting go, forced upon me by circumstance, was my first raw lesson in anicca. My attachment was to the form, the specific books, the specific arrangement, the identity of being a collector. The flood washed that away. But what remained? My love for the stories. It was intensified. My understanding of the ideas. In some ways, it was clarified, distilled to its essence without the physical crutch. I had confused the container for the content. Life, in its gentle or sometimes fierce way, reminds us that all containers are temporary. The body, the job title, the relationship status, the social standing, the prized possession, these are all vessels. They hold experiences for a time, but they are not the experiences themselves. Clinging to the vessel as it cracks is where we drown in sorrow. Learning to honor the water, the love, the wisdom, the experience, even as we release the broken cup, is the path of peace. This understanding directly confronts our greatest, most hidden source of pain, expectation. Expectation is the mind's attempt to enforce permanence on an impermanent world. It is a silent, rigid script we write for life, for others, and for ourselves. We expect people to act in certain ways based on our own internal rulebook. We expect life to be fair, linear, and rewarding of our efforts in the specific way we envision. When reality inevitably deviates from our script, which it always does, we feel betrayed, hurt, and disillusioned. The Buddha taught that this gap between expectation and reality is the breeding ground of suffering. I learned about the weight of expectation from a potter. He was a master of his craft, and I watched him for hours as he centered clay on the wheel. He would begin with a clear intention, a vase, a bowl. But as the clay spun, sometimes it would wobble. A slight imperfection in the clay, a tremor in his wet hands, and the form would begin to deviate from his mind's eye. A novice might force it, trying to muscle the clay back into the perfect, intended form, often resulting in collapse. But the master did something different. He would pause. He would feel the clay's new inclination. And then, with acceptance, he would follow it. The vase might become a slightly asymmetrical jug. The bowl might become a shallow dish with a wave-like rim. The final piece was never what he first imagined, but it was often more beautiful, more alive, precisely because it embraced the reality of the moment rather than fighting it. He told me, the suffering of a potter doesn't come from the clay's rebellion. It comes from his own stubborn attachment to the first ghost of an idea. The clay has its own nature, its own history of pressure and earth. My job is not to dominate it, but to have a conversation with it. The best pieces are collaborations with reality, not dictatorships of expectation. Our relationships are just like this. We have a ghost of an idea for our partner, our friend, our child, a perfect, static image. But they are living clay, with their own nature, their own history, their own wobbles on the wheel of life. When we try to force them to match our ghost, we create tension, resistance, and eventual collapse. When we learn to have a conversation with who they actually are in each moment, we create something relational, unique, and truly beautiful, even in its imperfections. So, how do we put this into practice? We start by becoming detectives of our own expectations. The next time you feel a sharp sting of disappointment, pause. Before blaming the other person or the circumstance, turn the light of inquiry inward. Ask gently, what was my unspoken script here? What did I expect to happen that didn't? You might find, I expected them to read my mind. I expected the event to go perfectly. I expected to be praised for my effort. Just the act of identifying the expectation loosens its grip. You see the ghost for what it is. A thought in your mind, not a law of the universe. You can then choose, do I cling to this ghost and suffer, or do I release it and engage with the rich, messy, real thing in front of me? This is the movement from a mindset of demand to one of discernment and allowance. It doesn't mean you have no standards or boundaries. A potter still needs to know the properties of clay and fire. It means your standards are based on wisdom and self-respect, not on fragile, unspoken fantasies. You can say, I expect to be treated with kindness, which is a healthy boundary rooted in your worth. That is different from, I expect you to always know exactly how to make me feel better without me speaking, which is a fantasy that sets you both up for failure. Letting go of the second type of expectation is what allows the first type of boundary to be clear, strong, and effective. As we close this part of our reflection, feel the rise and fall of your breath once more. See if you can sense, even for a moment, the impermanence within this very experience. The breath arises, lingers, and passes. A sound in the room arises, lingers, and fades. A thought arises, lingers, and dissolves. You are sitting in the epicenter of anicca, of constant, gentle change. There is no solid, permanent you to be found in this flow, only awareness, witnessing the beautiful, transient dance of form. Rest in that awareness. It is the one thing that does not come and go. It is the space in which all the changing things appear. Your true home is not in any of the passing forms, not in the book, not in the perfect pot, not in the other person's behavior. Your home is in the aware, spacious presence that holds it all. Let us move deeper, into a place that often feels vulnerable, the landscape of our relationships. We have touched on impermanence and expectation. Now, let's examine the very glue that often binds our suffering, attachment. In the West, we often conflate attachment with love. We believe that if we love deeply, we must be attached. Buddhism makes a crucial, liberating distinction. Love is an open hand. Attachment is a clenched fist. Love says, I care for you, and I wish for your happiness, whatever form that takes. Attachment says, I need you to be a certain way, near me, in my life, so that I can be happy. One is a gift. The other is a contract written in invisible ink, full of unstated terms and conditions. I learned about the weight of this clenched fist not from a person, but from a tree. There was a magnificent old maple in a park I frequented. Its limbs were broad, its shade deep and cool. I became fond of it. I'd have my morning tea under it, red against its trunk. I began to think of it as my tree. I felt a sense of ownership, of special connection. Then, one autumn, a city arborist came and nailed a small, yellow notice to its trunk. It was slated for removal due to a fungal disease deep in its roots, making it a hazard. I was distraught. I launched a small, one-person campaign to save it. I researched treatments, I called the parks department. I was emotionally invested in its survival. The day the crews arrived with their saws, I couldn't watch. I felt a genuine grief. A week later, I forced myself to return. The space where the tree had been was open, filled with light. It felt raw, empty. But as I stood there, I noticed something. Sunlight now reached a patch of wildflowers that had struggled in the deep shade. A young sapling of a different species, an oak, at the edge of the clearing, seemed to stand taller. The ecology of the spot had changed. My attachment had been to one specific form, that particular maple. My grief was for the loss of my shade, my spot, my companion. But the park itself, the life of the place, was not diminished. It was transformed. My clenched fist had been holding onto a single leaf, believing it was the whole forest. Love for the forest would have allowed me to grieve the maple while still appreciating the new light, the potential of the oak, the resilience of the ecosystem. My attachment had blinded me to the wider, ever-changing web of life. This is how attachment operates in our human connections. We fixate on a single person, a single role they play for us. The partner, the best friend, the child as we imagine them to be. We cling to them as if they are the only source of a particular shade or comfort in our emotional ecosystem. When they change, when they get sick, when they grow distant, when they pass away, our entire inner world feels felt. We say, I can't live without them. That is the voice of attachment, not of love. Love knows that while the loss of a beloved tree is painful, the forest of the heart is vast and can eventually integrate the change, allowing new forms of light and growth. Love is rooted in the well-being of the other, even if their path leads them away from our shade. Attachment is rooted in our own fear of being exposed, of losing our designated source of comfort. The Buddha taught that attachment, or upadana, is what fuels the cycle of suffering. It's the grasping after pleasant experiences, people, and states of mind, and the pushing away of unpleasant ones. We see this so clearly in our daily lives. We grasp at praise and recoil from criticism. We cling to a happy moment and resist a sad one. We try to freeze our relationships in a pleasurable phase and are terrified of conflict or change. This grasping and rejecting is an exhausting full-time job, a fight against the natural flow of life. Non-attachment, then, is not a cold, emotionless state. It is the wise and compassionate decision to unclench the fist. It is to hold experiences, and people, in an open palm, appreciating them while they are there, allowing them to change, and letting them go when it is time, without trying to glue them to our hand. Let me share an origin story about this. A student once asked a Zen master, "How do I practice non-attachment?" The master handed him a beautiful, empty teacup. "Hold this," he said. The student held it. Then the master began to pour steaming, fragrant tea into it. He poured and poured. The tea overflowed the rim, spilling over the student's hands, hot and messy. The student yelped and dropped the cup, which shattered on the floor. "Why did you drop it?" the master asked. "Because it was overflowing. It was burning me," the student exclaimed. The master nodded. The cup was empty. It could receive the tea. Your mind is like that cup. When it is full of opinions, judgments, attachments, and old stories, there is no space for the fresh tea of this moment. When you try to hold more than the present moment, clinging to the past, demanding a specific future, you get burned, and you make a mess. Non-attachment is simply keeping your cup empty. Ready to receive what is, right now, without already being full of what should be. Our relationships become painful when our cup is already full of who we think the person should be. There is no space for who they actually are, right now. Their true self overflows the rim of our expectation, burns us with disappointment, and we are tempted to drop the relationship entirely. The practice is to first empty our own cup. To release the fixed ideas, the old grievances, the future demands. Then, we can meet the person anew, in the fresh tea of the present moment. We can receive them as they are, not as a refill of our old, stale stories. So tonight, as you rest in awareness, bring to mind a relationship, any relationship. Notice, without judgment, where your hand might be clenched. Where are you holding a contract? Where are you insisting on a specific shade? Can you, even just as an experiment in your heart, imagine opening that fist? Not to push the person away, but to hold them more lightly, more spaciously. Can you wish for their happiness, independent of how it serves you? This is the beginning of converting attachment into love. It is a practice of courageous trust, trust that your own well-being does not depend on controlling another's growth, just as the forest does not depend on a single tree. Your heart is the entire forest, capable of sheltering many lives in many seasons. Let your awareness be soft, like moonlight on still water. We've spoken of sources, impermanence, and the open hand of non-attachment. Now, let us turn to the quiet architect of so much of our inner turmoil, the stories we tell ourselves. Buddhism places great emphasis on sankhara, which can be translated as mental formations or volitional activities. These are the thoughts, the narratives, the interpretations we spin from the raw silk of experience. We do not suffer from events. We suffer from the stories we wrap around them. We live not in reality, but in the haunted house of our own commentary. I witnessed the sheer power of a story in a very simple way. I was walking along a gravel path with two friends after a light rain. We came to a large, unavoidable puddle. The first friend groaned. "Fantastic. Just perfect. Now my shoes are going to be soaked and cold for hours. This always happens to me. This mud is going to ruin everything." His face was a storm cloud. He trudged through, each step a dramatic act of suffering. The second friend paused at the edge. She looked down, then up at the sky where the sun was breaking through. A small smile appeared. "Look," she said, her voice soft. "The sky is right here." And she pointed into the puddle. There, reflected in the murky water, was a perfect, shimmering image of the clearing sky and the trees, upside down and beautiful. She stepped through gently, almost respectfully, as if not to disturb the temporary artwork. The event was identical, a puddle on the path. The suffering or peace was entirely a product of the internal narrative. One story was about victimhood and ruin. The other was about discovery and transient beauty. Both were valid interpretations. Only one allowed for peace. We are all constantly writing and directing this internal movie, casting ourselves as heroes, victims, or side characters in other people's dramas. The Buddha's teaching on right view, the first step of the Noble Eightfold Path, is an invitation to become the editor of this film. To question our scripts. Is this story true? Is it helpful? Does it lead to peace or to suffering? We have a thought, they ignored me because they don't care. That is a story. The bare fact is, they did not respond. Everything else, the reason, the meaning, the judgment, is a layer of narrative we add, a layer that often causes our pain. I learned about editing my internal film from a watchmaker. His shop was a tiny cave of quiet precision. I brought him an old pocket watch that had belonged to my grandfather, its hands frozen. He placed it on a green felt cloth, put on his loupe, and opened the case. Inside was a universe of tiny wheels, springs, and pivots. "The problem," he said after a moment, "is rarely in the big gears you can see. It's a speck of dust here, on this escapement. Or a tiny bit of dried oil here, on this pivot point. Invisible to the eye, but it stops the entire story." He took a delicate tool and, with a breath so soft it wouldn't disturb a dandelion, he brushed at an almost microscopic point. Then he applied a minuscule drop of fresh oil. He closed the case, wound the watch, and held it to my ear. Tick 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 tick. A steady, reliable rhythm resumed. Time, for that watch, began to move forward again. Our mental suffering is often like that. The big events of our lives, the losses, the changes, are like the large, visible gears. They turn. But what often freezes our inner sense of time, our forward movement, is a tiny, almost invisible story. A speck of dust-like thought, "I am not worthy of moving on." A dried-up drop of an old feeling, "This pain defines me." We focus on the big, broken gear of the event itself, trying to hammer it into a different shape. But the healing, the unlocking of forward movement, often lies in attending with immense gentleness to that tiny, sticky point of narrative. What is the specific, repetitive thought that freezes me here? Can I, with the breath of awareness, gently brush it clean? Can I apply the oil of self-compassion to that dried pivot point of my heart? This is the practice of mindfulness, or sati. It is not about emptying the mind, but about changing our relationship to its content. It is putting on the loop of kind attention and observing the workings of our own inner mechanism without immediately trying to fix or judge it. When the story arises, "This is unbearable, I am alone, they are wronging me," we learn to note it. "Ah, here is the victim story." Or, "Here is the fear of the future story." We see it as a story, a mental formation, not as absolute truth. This simple act of labeling creates a sliver of space between you and the thought. In that space, there is freedom. You are not the frozen watch, you are the watchmaker who can see the mechanism and know what to gently adjust. Let's practice this now, in the safety of this moment. Bring to mind a minor recent irritation. A traffic jam, a thoughtless comment, a plan that changed. Notice the bare facts. Now, notice the story you built around it. "This ruined my day. They are so inconsiderate. Nothing ever works out for me." See if you can, just for now, gently put that story down on the green felt cloth of your awareness. Look at it. This is the ruined day story. This is the inconsiderate people story. Does the tight feeling in your chest change, even a little, when you see it as a story you are telling, rather than the reality you are trapped inside? This is the beginning of editorial power. You cannot always control the events that come to your shop. But you can learn the skill of maintaining the inner mechanism so it keeps time, keeps moving, even when the weather outside is stormy. The ultimate story we tell, the one that underlies all others, is the story of a separate, solid, permanent self that needs to be protected, pleased, and validated. Buddhism's teaching on anatta, or non-self, is often misunderstood. It is not saying you don't exist. It is pointing out that what you call me is not a fixed, central command center. It is a flowing, interdependent process, a river of body sensations, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. You are more like a symphony than a soloist. The suffering arises when the flute section believes it is the entire orchestra and tries to play all the parts, or when it feels threatened when the violins have the melody. As you rest now, see if you can feel this not as a philosophy, but as a direct experience. Feel the sensations in your body, pressure, temperature, subtle pulses. These are the orchestra. Hear the sounds in the room. These are part of the symphony of this moment. Notice thoughts floating through. More instruments in the ensemble. Where, precisely, is the solid listener? Isn't the listening itself just another part of the music? This flowing, aware, sensation-filled happening is what you are. It is vast, interconnected, and free when not contracted into the small, scared story of me and mine. When you relate to the world from this flowing, interconnected space, your stories become lighter, more provisional. You write in pencil, not in stone. And your heart becomes more resilient, like a river that adapts to every bend, because it knows it is the water, not the riverbank. Let us sink deeper now, into the fertile soil from which both our suffering and our freedom grow. The quality of our own attention. Where you place your attention is where you place your life force. It is the most powerful creative act you engage in, moment to moment. Buddhism teaches mindfulness not as a passive state, but as an active, vibrant cultivation of attention. It is the practice of coming home, again and again, to the vivid reality of this breath, this sensation, this sound, instead of being kidnapped by the remembered past or the imagined future. I want to tell you about a lesson I learned from a master woodcarver. He was working on a statue of a bodhisattva, a being of compassion. The face was serene, the folds of the robe flowed like water. I watched him for an hour as he worked on a single inch of the wooden robe. His chisel moved with microscopic precision. His entire universe had contracted to the meeting point of steel and grain. There was no statue, no workshop, no time. There was only this cut, this curl of wood coming away. I finally whispered, "How do you maintain such focus? Don't you get tired? Don't your thoughts wander to the finished piece?" He paused, put down his chisel, and looked at me. His eyes were remarkably clear. "If I think of the finished piece," he said, "my hand becomes heavy with expectation. It tries to rush. It makes mistakes. If I think of my tiredness, my arm becomes weak. I only have the energy for this cut. The next cut will take care of itself." The statue reveals itself one breath, one chip of wood, at a time. My job is not to create the statue. My job is to be fully present for the creation of this singular cut. Our minds are so rarely where our bodies are. We are carving the statue of our life, but our attention is miles away, rehashing an old argument, carving a ghost, worrying about a future deadline, carving a phantom. We are exhausted because we are trying to carve 3 statues at once. The one from yesterday we wish we could fix, the one for tomorrow we're afraid of, and the one right under our hands that we are neglecting. The anxiety, the overwhelm, the feeling of being scattered, this is the natural result of a fragmented attention. Peace is the natural result of a gathered one. It is not a mystical state, it is the practical outcome of doing what the woodcarver did, bringing all of your life force back to the single, present cut you are making. This is beautifully illustrated by a personal memory of getting lost in a dense fog. I was on a coastal path, and a thick, white sea mist rolled in with shocking speed. Within minutes, I could not see more than 3 feet in any direction. The familiar landmarks, the cliff edge, the distant lighthouse, the path ahead, vanished. Panic started to rise. My mind raced into the future. What if I walk off the cliff? What if I'm stuck here all night? Then, I remembered something a mountain guide had once said: when you can't see the summit, focus on your next step. I forced myself to stop. I looked down. Right at my feet, the path was perfectly clear. I could see the gravel, a few blades of grass. I took one step. Then, I looked down again. The next 3 feet of path were visible. I took another step. My world shrank to the circle of gravel illuminated by my own presence. There was no cliff, no lighthouse, no miles to go. There was only this step. And then the next. By attending completely to the immediate, visible ground, I walked myself safely out of the fog. My anxiety existed only when my attention leaped into the invisible, frightening future. My safety was found when my attention returned to the undeniable reality of the present step. Our emotional fogs are just like this. We are blinded by anxiety about a future we cannot see, or regret about a past we can no longer touch. The way out is not to try and see farther into the fog, it's to shorten your gaze. Bring it all the way back to this breath. This inhalation. This exhalation. This is the gravel under your feet. Then, to the sensation in your hands. The weight of your body on the chair. This is the next 3 feet of path. When you are consumed with worry about a loved one, see if you can feel the worry as a sensation in your body, a tightness in the chest, a clenching in the gut. Attend to that sensation with gentle curiosity, as you would attend to the gravel. This is your actual experience in this moment, not the story about the future. By attending to the reality of the present sensation, you walk yourself out of the story's fog. The Buddha taught that the mind, left untrained, is like a wild elephant, powerful, chaotic, and destructive. The practice of mindfulness is the gentle tether and the goad that trains the elephant. You are not killing the elephant. You are befriending its immense strength and directing it with wisdom. Each time you notice your attention has been dragged into a painful past memory or a fearful future fantasy, and you gently lead it back to the breath, you are driving a stake into the ground. You are saying, here is where we train. Here, in the present. Over time, the mind learns. It becomes less wild, more settled, more able to use its power for discernment and compassion rather than for running in terrified circles. So, let's practice this gathering. Right now, choose one single anchor. The classic anchor is the breath. Feel the cool air as it enters your nostrils. Feel the slight pause. Feel the warmer air as it leaves. Don't control it. Just feel it. Your mind will wander. It will remember an email, plan a meal, replay a conversation. This is not failure. This is the nature of the untrained elephant. The moment you realize it has wandered, that moment of realization is mindfulness. That is the victory. No judgment. Just a gentle, kind note, wandering. And then, with the same gentleness you'd use to guide a child's hand, lead your attention back to the breath. Cool in. Warm out. This simple act, repeated, is the most radical restructuring of your inner world. You are not trying to stop thoughts. You are changing your relationship to them. You are cultivating the watcher, the space in which thoughts arise and pass, like clouds in a vast sky. As you rest in this practice, you might begin to notice a profound truth: the present moment, no matter what it contains, is always workable. It is the only moment you are actually alive in. The past is a memory, a story. The future is a fantasy, a story. But this breath, this sound, this sensation, this is real. It may contain pain, but you can be with pain in the present moment. You cannot be with pain that is a memory or a fear, that is a ghost that feeds on your inattention. By rooting yourself in the workable reality of now, you drain the ghosts of their power. You become like the woodcarver, possessing all the energy you need for this cut. You become like the walker in the fog, finding all the path you need in the next visible step. Your life ceases to be a burdensome project and becomes a series of manageable, present-moment experiences. And in that series, you will find a peace that is not dependent on the weather, but on the steadfastness of your own attention. Let us now turn our attention to a force as powerful as attention, but one that often flows in the opposite direction: reactivity. Between an event and your experience of it, there is a critical, often invisible space. In that space lies your freedom. Buddhism deeply examines this space, this gap between stimulus and response. It is where our karma, our intentional action, is generated. Most of us live as if we are billiard balls, struck by the cue of external events and sent crashing in a predetermined direction of anger, fear, or craving. The practice is to discover we are not the ball. We are the player who can choose, in that gap, which shot to take. I learned about this gap from a master glassblower. I visited his hot shop, a place of roaring furnaces and intense, focused energy. He was gathering a molten gather of glass on the end of a blowpipe, a glowing, orange orb of potential. He began to shape it with wooden blocks and wet newspaper, but the form started to wobble, to sag in a way he didn't intend. My untrained eye saw a mistake, a failure. I expected him to frown, to maybe even discard the piece back into the melt furnace. But he didn't. He didn't react at all. He simply stopped. He held the pipe steadily, watching the glass slowly turn from orange to a deep red. He was waiting. He was allowing the material to find a new equilibrium of heat and form. Then, with a calm that was palpable, he brought it to his lips and blew. Not a frantic, corrective blow, but a steady, sustained breath. The glass expanded, not into the form he had initially intended, but into a different, more organic, beautiful shape, a wide, shallow bowl with undulating edges. He later told me, the glass has its own intelligence. If you fight it when it rebels, you get a fight. You get tension, strain, and usually a break. If you pause, give it space, and then work with its new inclination, you get a collaboration. The best pieces are born from my response to the glass's reaction, not from my insistence on my first idea. Our emotional life is exactly this process. Someone says a harsh word, a sudden, hot intensity. Our habitual reaction is to immediately blow back, to shape the situation with our anger or hurt, to try to force it back into the mold of how we think it should be. This is the fight. It creates tension, strain, and often a break. But what if, in that moment when the heat rises, we could do what the glassblower did? Pause. Stop. Feel the heat of the emotion without immediately acting on it. Allow it to be, to change color from the bright orange of rage to the deeper red of understanding. And then, from that space of pause, choose our response. Maybe the response is still a firm breath, a clear boundary. But it is a chosen, steady breath, not a reactive, frantic one. It is a collaboration with reality, not a war against it. This gap is where mindfulness meets wisdom. It is the practice of samma sati, right mindfulness, coupled with samma sankappa, right intention. You are mindful enough to see the reactive impulse arise. I want to yell, I want to retreat, I want to grasp. And in that seeing, you create the gap. Then, you bring intention to that gap. You ask, will this action lead to peace or to more suffering? For me. For others. You move from being a puppet of habit to being a gardener of your own inner landscape. I remember a powerful lesson in this from a family dog we had when I was a child. He was a good-natured but excitable terrier. We had a sliding glass door to the backyard. When a squirrel would run by, the dog would see it, let out a yelp, and sprint full tilt toward the door to give chase. He never learned that the door was closed. Bang! He'd hit the clear glass, tumble back, shake it off, and the cycle would repeat. We laughed, but it was a perfect metaphor for our own reactivity. We see the squirrel of our desire or our aversion, the thing we want to get, the thing we want to avoid, and we sprint headlong toward the glass door of our fixed habits, slamming into the same painful consequences over and over. The door isn't the problem. The lack of pause, the lack of seeing the transparent barrier of cause and effect, is the problem. The practice is to train ourselves, when the squirrel of provocation runs by, to stop at the threshold. To see the glass. To feel the impulse to charge, and to choose, instead, to sit down, to watch the squirrel, and to maybe use the doorknob. How do we build this capacity? We start small, in moments of low stakes. You're about to reach for a second serving of food when you're already full. Pause. Feel the craving. See it as a thought, a sensation. This is the wanting mind. That's the gap. Then, choose. Maybe you still take the serving, but now it's a conscious choice, not a compulsive reflex. You're breaking the automatic circuit. You're stretching the gap. Traffic cuts you off. The heat rises. Pause. Feel the tightness in your jaw, the flash of anger. This is aversion. That's the gap. Breathe into it. Then choose your response. Maybe it's a deliberate exhale and letting it go. You are no longer the dog slamming into the glass. You are the human who sees the whole room, the door, and the squirrel outside, and decides what, if anything, needs to be done. This is the cultivation of what is called upekkha, or equanimity. It is not indifference. It is balance. It is the mind that is like the deep ocean, undisturbed by the changing waves on the surface. A storm of emotion can rage, but you are learning to rest in the depths, where there is calm. You feel the wave, but you are not overturned by it. This equanimity is what allows for true compassion. If you are constantly being capsized by other people's emotional waves, you cannot help them. You are just another person drowning. But if you can maintain your balance, your center, you can extend a steady hand. As you rest now, bring to mind a minor recent irritation. Feel the memory of the reactive impulse. Now, in the safety of this reflection, insert a pause. Replay the moment, but this time, when the impulse arises, imagine yourself as the glassblower, simply holding the pipe, watching the heat change color. Or as the person at the sliding door, seeing the squirrel, feeling the urge to run, but choosing to place a hand on the glass instead. Feel the power in that pause. That pause is the birthplace of your freedom. It is the space between the old, conditioned you and the wise, responsive you that you are becoming. Every time you find it, no matter how small the moment, you are rewiring your being from reactivity to responsiveness. You are moving from a life of collisions to a life of conscious, graceful shaping. Let us gently shift our gaze now, from the inner mechanics of reaction to the very atmosphere in which our heart exists, compassion. In the West, we often think of compassion as a feeling of pity or a desire to rescue. In Buddhism, compassion, or karuna, is something far more profound and stable. It is the heartfelt recognition of suffering, in oneself and others, coupled with a deep wish for that suffering to cease. It is not an emotion that comes and goes with sentiment. It is a quality of the heart that is cultivated, like a fire that is steadily tended. And here is the crucial, often overlooked Buddhist wisdom. Genuine compassion for others is impossible without first turning that compassionate gaze upon yourself. You cannot offer from an empty cup, and you cannot offer kindness you have not first given to the one who is always with you, your own being. I witnessed the birth of this understanding in a most unexpected place, a pottery studio for veterans dealing with deep trauma. The instructor was a gentle, quiet man. He gave each person a lump of clay and said, "Your only task for the next hour is to make something that holds water." The room filled with intense focus, but also with frustration. One man, his hands scarred and shaking, kept trying to force his clay into a perfect, symmetrical vase. It would collapse, or crack. His frustration grew into anger, then a frozen, defeated silence. The instructor knelt beside him, took a fresh lump of clay, and began to work it. But he wasn't making a vase. He made a simple, asymmetrical bowl. It was lopsided. The walls were uneven. He held it up. "This," he said softly, "holds water perfectly." He then pointed to the man's scarred, trembling hands. "These hands have held experiences that are heavy and jagged. Why ask them to make something that requires the peace they haven't yet found? Make a bowl that looks like what you feel. Let it be lumpy. Let it be imperfect. Let it be strong in its own way. The water doesn't care about symmetry. It only wants to be held." The man stared, then let out a breath that seemed to come from his boots. He destroyed his attempted vase, and with a new, almost tender focus, began to shape a wide, shallow, deeply textured bowl. It looked like a stone worn smooth by a river, solid and accepting. That was the moment. Compassion for himself began not with a thought, but with an action, allowing the form to match the truth of his current reality, not an idealized fantasy of perfection. He stopped fighting his own trembling and worked with it. That is karuna for the self. It is the willingness to make the lopsided bowl, to hold your own experience, your fear, your anger, your imperfection, without judgment, without forcing it into a shape it cannot hold. We are so often that veteran, trying to force our inner life into a perfect vase of how we should be, always calm, always productive, always kind. And when we crack under the pressure, we meet ourselves with scorn. Why can't I get this right? What's wrong with me? This is the opposite of compassion. It is inner warfare. The Buddha's path begins with ahimsa, non-harming, directed inward. Before you can truly wish for the end of suffering in others, you must cease creating suffering for yourself through self-judgment, relentless expectation, and denial of your own humanity. I learned a daily practice of this from watching an old gardener tend to a blighted peach tree. The tree was half dead, its branches blackened by disease. The sensible thing would have been to cut it down. But this gardener did something else. Every day, he would visit it. He would prune away only the clearly dead wood, making clean cuts. He would apply a gentle salve to the wounds. He would water its roots, not with a flood, but with a slow, deep trickle. He didn't berate the tree for being sick. He didn't ignore its diseased parts. He didn't demand it produce fruit. He simply tended to it exactly as it was, with patience and care, giving it the conditions to heal from its own center. Within 2 seasons, a few healthy green shoots emerged from the base. It wasn't the tree it once was, but it was alive, fighting. We must become that gardener for our own hearts. Your heart may have blighted branches, old hurts, fears, patterns of thinking that seem deadening. Compassion is not pretending those branches are lush and flowering. It is the daily, patient tending. It is pruning the dead thoughts of past regret with the clean cut of mindfulness. It is applying the salve of self-forgiveness to old wounds. It is watering the roots with the slow, deep trickle of your own attentive breath, not flooding yourself with forced positivity or harsh discipline. You tend to yourself not to become perfect, but to become alive, to allow the green shoots of peace to emerge from the core of your being, in their own time. This self-compassion is the foundation for the bridge to others. When you understand from the inside how it feels to be met with patience instead of judgment, with space instead of demand, you can then offer that same atmosphere to another person. You see their reactivity, their pain, their lopsided bowl, and you don't feel the urge to fix it into a vase. You recognize the suffering. You create a space where it can be held. You become the steady ground, not the frantic rescuer. This is true compassion. It doesn't say, "Poor you, let me fix it." It says, "This is hard. I am here with you in it." It is a profound act of trust in another's capacity to find their own healing, just as you are learning to trust your own. So, how do we begin this tending? Start with the body, the most immediate recipient of your care. When you feel stress, instead of pushing through with gritted teeth, place a hand on your own heart, or your belly. Feel the warmth of your own touch. Breathe into that place. This is a direct, physical transmission of karuna. It bypasses the thinking mind and speaks the language of care. When you make a mistake, instead of the inner critic's rant, try a simple phrase, spoken inwardly with gentle sincerity: "It's okay. I'm learning. May I be kind to myself." This is watering the roots. As you rest now, bring your awareness to your heart center. Imagine it not as a perfect symbol, but as that peach tree, or as that lopsided bowl. See its unique shape, its history, its scars, its beauty. Send the breath there. With each inhalation, imagine a slow, deep trickle of patience entering the roots. With each exhalation, imagine a warm, golden light of acceptance surrounding the entire form, not to change it, but to hold it. This is you, tending to you. This is the most important relationship you will ever nurture. From this well-tended inner garden, compassion for all beings naturally flowers. It is not an effort. It is an overflow. You stop trying to be a source of light for others and realize you are becoming light, and light naturally illuminates whatever is near. Let us arrive at our final shared pause. Let the breath be easy, the body at rest. We have journeyed through concepts of source, impermanence, attachment, story, attention, reaction, compassion, and community. Now, let them all dissolve, like ingredients into a nourishing broth. What remains is not a checklist of teachings, but a single, living question: where are you standing? Are you standing on the shifting ground of other people's opinions, on the crumbling cliff of past regrets, on the fragile ice of future worries? Or are you discovering, beneath all of that, the solid, unwavering bedrock of your own aware presence. This is the ultimate invitation of the path the Buddha walked, to come home. To cease the search outside for the stability that can only be found within the searcher. I will leave you with one last story, a parable of my own making. Imagine a majestic, ancient bell in a forgotten temple high in the mountains. Over centuries, the bell has become completely overgrown. Thick vines coil around its stand, moss carpets its surface, layers of dirt and leaves have filled its interior. A traveler comes upon it. He sees only a strange, green, mossy hillock. He rests against it, unaware of what it is. He feels its solidity, but hears no sound from it. He lives his whole life coming to this spot, leaning on this silent, earthy mound, thinking, this is a quiet, stable place. One day, a storm of unprecedented force rages through the mountains. Torrential rains fall, and winds of terrible power scour the cliffs. The traveler shelters in the temple ruins. The wind tears at the vines, the rain washes the dirt and moss away. As the storm reaches its peak, a final, mighty gust sweeps through. It strikes the now revealed curve of the great bell. Gonning. A deep, vast, resonant note rings out, vibrating through the stone of the temple, through the very bones of the mountain, through the traveler's own chest. It is a sound of profound peace and immense power, a sound that had been there all along, waiting within the form. The storm did not create the sound. The bell had always possessed the capacity. The storm merely cleared away everything that was not the bell. This, the Buddha might say, is your mind. Your true nature is that bell, clear, resonant, inherently peaceful, and powerful. The vines and the moss are your attachments, to people, to ideas, to stories of yourself. The dirt and leaves are your accumulated worries, your endless planning, your clinging to past and future. You have been leaning against your own essence, mistaking the covering for the core, living a life that feels solid but silent. The storms of life, the losses, the changes, the disappointments, the raw moments of being stripped bare, these are not your enemies. They are the very winds and rains that cleanse you. They are ruthless gardeners, tearing away what is not you, so that what is authentically, essentially you can finally wring out. Your suffering has never been a sign that you are broken. It has been a sign that you are encountering friction between the unshakable truth of your nature and the shaky, false structures you've built upon it. The heartbreak when a relationship ends is not just the loss of a person, it is the sound of a vine being torn from the bell of your heart, a painful but necessary clearing. The anxiety about the future is the moss of unreality being scrubbed away by the wind of present moment truth. Each time you meet a difficulty with awareness, with a pause, with a breath, you are not just enduring the storm. You are allowing it to perform its sacred work of revelation. So, the practice, now and forever, is this: stop building more vines. And start listening for the bell. Stop building vines by handing your happiness to others for safekeeping. Stop by believing the story that you are incomplete. Stop by fighting the natural change of all things. Stop by filling the silence with frantic noise. Every time you choose the open hand over the clenched fist, the present step over the foggy mile, the gentle question over the harsh assumption, you are ceasing to add another layer over your true self. And start listening. In the quiet moments, in the breath between thoughts, in the space after a sound fades, in the stillness before sleep, listen. What is here when the story stops? What remains when you are not trying to be anything for anyone? That spacious, aware, peaceful presence is the bell. Your very capacity to hear these words, to feel sensation, to be conscious, that is the resonance. You are not becoming peaceful. You are remembering the peace that is your fundamental state, obscured by layers of doing and striving. This is why the Buddha's final message was one of utter fearlessness. He did not say, "I have found something you do not have." He said, "Wake up." He pointed to the bell already within you. The entire path. The ethics, the meditation, the wisdom, is just the diligent, compassionate work of clearing the vines, not so you can become a bell, but so you can realize you have always been one, and always will be. As we conclude, feel the weight of your body one last time. Feel the air on your skin. Hear the sounds in the room. In all of this, can you sense the one who is aware? Not the thoughts about the experience, but the pure experiencing itself. That is the bell. It is silent, yet it holds the potential for all sound. It is still, yet it is the source of all resonance. Carry this knowing forward. When you walk into your day, into your relationships, into your challenges, walk as a bell that knows its own nature. You will encounter more storms. Things will cling to you. But now you know the secret, the storm is a cleansing. The clinging things are temporary. And at your core, there is a sound of wholeness that cannot be damaged, that cannot be taken, that can only be forgotten or remembered. Remember. You are not a problem to be solved. You are a mystery to be lived. A resonance to be sounded. A clear, empty bell, waiting to ring with the music of this one, precious, impermanent life. Thank you for walking this path with me here at Monk's Temple. The journey inward never ends, because the discovery of your own depth is infinite. Go in peace. Live from your source. And whenever you forget, simply pause, breathe, and listen for the sound of your own being. It is always here.